Next up, we have Skippy Mesirow. Skippy is another close friend. When you have a big project to do, you just call on your friends because they're least likely to say no. and and we happen to have some really smart friends here. Skippy does a lot of things professionally, but I will say one of the ways that I identify him is as a civil servant. He ran for city council and lost, and he ran for city council again and he won. And I think that public service can be a pretty thankless job sometimes. And I've never met someone just so devoted to what he's doing as a citizen. I think that that probably is a way that Skippy really identifies himself, although I'll let him tell you. And thank you for joining us, Skippy, and thanks for sharing your thoughts on governance, on policy, and on anything else you want to illuminate.
Thank you so much, Jess, and thank you everyone for being here. I am definitely inspired. I wanted to give a shout out. When we first started, Nicole Petchek, I hope I'm saying that right, I saw in the comment box the question, who are the panelists? And I loved that because I felt like growing up, going to see people speak, there was such a tendency for me to mythologize these people, that they were on another plane of existence. And I love that in this crisis, in this platform, we have been flattened because a speaker or a panelist is no different than somebody in the audience. The only reason they're on that stage is because of a series of choices that they made intentionally or by chance. And there is nothing that any one of us has done that every one of you cannot do. And I think that's why we're all here. So I just wanted to give that shout out. I think that's super cool. As Jess said, I'm here to sort of speak to our political world and aspirations, which probably has half of you wanting to turn this off right now, because the political world is ugly and it has failed us, all of us. And that's exactly why we need to be talking about it. You're all probably wondering who's this weird dude named Skippy, so I'll give you a little snippet of kind of my background in this, and then tell you what we can co-create together. My interest in politics superseded my knowledge of my interest in politics. My grandma likes to tell this story of when I was very little, 2-3 years old. They had a condo in California for the winter, and my mom would dress me up in a little blazer and put a hat on me. And before I would sit down in my seat, I insisted on walking down the aisle of the little one-row plane and shaking hands with everyone and introducing myself before I sat down. So I think this is pretty ingrained for me. I started out working for candidate and then President Obama in 2008. And while that was the most exciting, wonderful experience I could have imagined coming straight out of college, I think I embodied a lot of the worst tendencies of some of the things that Stacy was talking about. I was ideologically rigid, I was partisan, and I was very judgmental of people who thought differently than I did because I hadn't walked in their shoes and I didn't understand their life experience. And after spending a good amount of time working in Chicago politics in the State House, I very quickly realized that policy itself doesn't make good. There was so much broken, corrupted, and gross about that culture to the point where I couldn't stand it anymore, and I left that world. And I was very lucky to have some experiences that began to reshape how I thought about this. I was fortunate enough to be able to travel, and I found myself a Jew who is bilingual in Iran. I found myself a proponent of democracy and capitalism in North Korea and Haiti. I was this Cold War dove apologist experiencing some of the worst outcomes of the Soviet Union and Russia and rethinking my positions. And I think through those experiences, not only was I able to see the beautiful, gorgeous diversity of our world, but the resounding sameness of humanity, regardless of where we come from. I had an experience of kind of subversively showing up at a Republican primary to try and sway the outcome, even though I wasn't going to vote for a Republican, and followed my curiosity down a path to a Republican state convention where um, I found genuinely caring, wonderful people who had a different life experience that I could not only see, but I could realize that had I grown up where they grew up in their shoes, I very much would inhabit or could inhabit the policy positions they had, and them I. And so I emerged from all of this and did something quite unconventional. I went from national politics to state politics to regional and then hyperlocal. And I'm now lucky enough to serve on city council with 4 other individuals in my favorite place in the world, Aspen, Colorado, a tiny, tiny little town of just 7,000 people, but with international connections, microphone, and ability to make change that far outstrips our population. And my mission now is to shift our political culture because it is fundamentally broken and it can't serve us. You know, Einstein said that you cannot solve a problem with the same level of consciousness that created it. And we need a new way of doing things in our politics. So we find ourselves now here in this crisis, and I view this as 2 crises. We have the immediate COVID crisis, but we also have a political crisis that predates it. John Adams said, opining on democracy, that remember, democracies never last long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There was never a democracy yet that did not commit suicide. Just like sit with that for a second. Because our democracy here and across the Western world is being challenged like not since the fascist rise pre-World War II. And even if politics is something you are not interested in, that you do not want to be part of, the system that undergirds our society is what makes possible or impossible everything else that we want to do. And so it falls on all of us to improve that system and make it work so everything else that we dream can manifest. And I think back to those travels now. You know, when I would return from, say, a trip to North Korea, somebody would say, like, 1, are you crazy? 2, what is that like? Is it terrible? Is it, explain it to me. And I would always say the same thing. I come back to the same thought, which is in travel, there are no bad experiences. There are only enjoyable experiences and experiences that you learn from. And the worse the experiences at the time, when you make it out the other end, that is always the one you most cherish because it's where you grow and learn and change the most. And as a society, right now, for the first time in our lives and maybe humanity's lives, we are collectively in that shit. We are in that moment where if we choose to, we can find the ultimate growth. And it's our choice. As panelists, as viewers, it is our choice as to what we are going to do. And I can promise you this, it won't start in Washington, it won't start in your state. It will start locally and it will start with individuals. And so that's what I want to do in our session today, if you care to join, is to help you tease out what are the things that really upset you that you want to change. And rather than channeling those as blame towards someone else or yelling at your TV, what can we do on a local level to organize together and to take the actions necessary to make the changes that will ripple out into this world? So thank you for letting me be here.
Thank you so much, Skippy. And I just want to